Okay, I'll start recording, so go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So my name is Nikita Ustinov. I am 27 years old. I'm from Belarus, but since 2 or 3 months, I've moved to Vilnius, to Lithuania. I enjoy it, and today I'm gonna tell you something about functions. It's the first part of our meetings, so it will be really only introduction. I will be glad if you participate in conversation. I will be glad to answer your questions. So let me share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Nope, black screen.
Okay. Stop sharing. And now?
Nope, still black screen.
Oh, what the heck? I don't know what's going on.
I can see the mouse, but nothing else.
Nothing else. That's the issue also with my image. So for some reason the web camera not working and screen sharing not working. I've updated the latest version of Microsoft Teams, but here it is.
Okay, it's a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Have you tried the online Teams?
No, I didn't. Let me try it.
Try it.
Usually I try the desktop version, but they also have some web service, yeah?
Yeah, they have a web version.
Perfect. Okay, signing in. I hope it will help. Okay, I'm leaving from desktop and signing in from the web version.
Sure. Well, I can see you.
Fine.
And can hear you, so that's cool.
I'm glad the problem was solved. So I've introduced myself and we can start. Let's go. Sharing my screen.
It works.
It works fine. And here it is. You see it, right?
Yep.
Perfect. So today is the first part of our meeting. We're talking about function in JavaScript. As I said, it will be only introduction. We'll be talking about some basic features, what the function is, the ways of defining a function. We'll talk about function name, function parameters, return value, so it's basic stuff, and how to call the functions. All right. So yeah, this presentation is really more for me to help me not to lose my thoughts and like my little concept. Function itself in JavaScript is a block of code which help us to solve some problem. When I'm starting to explain technical things, I like to talk about like in parallels the same things in our real life. When I was preparing this lecture, I started to looking into my apartment, in my room, what could be a good example of a function in real life. And I found this. So this is a bicycle tube itself. You can see what it is. And on the other side, there is a sequence of actions you need to perform to have a new tube on your bicycle. Yep. Guys, if you hear me, please show something. Do you hear me? Yes. Fine. So function itself is a block of instructions which helps us to perform some action. And this is some example from real life. We go next. Soon we will switch to the live stream where I will define function in live, run it, and etc. Talking about function, function may have name. It's the name of a function. I suggest you, when you create a new function, to give it a to give it semantically describing name. So when you look at it, you can understand from the first sight what does it perform. Next is parameters. Parameters is some values we pass to function and which these values our parameters uses in the future. So it's some kind of values which function operates with. For example, if we create a function which returns us result of sum of two numbers, we pass these numbers which should be summed as parameters. And function also may have return value. It's a result of work of our function. Do you have any questions on this? So we can go further, right? Guys, please show some reaction. Fine. So I've talked a bit about what function is. Now we will be talking about the ways of defining functions. Function itself is a block of instruction we need to perform. So this is only instructions itself. At first we define it, and at the second we call it. There are several ways of defining a function in JavaScript, and the first one is called function declaration. Function declaration is the way of defining a function which starts by typing in the keyword function. Then we choose the name of our function. So I would like to perform a simple example, classic simple example. We'll have sum of two integers. So we have some semantically good name. After the name of function, we open the round brackets, and round brackets serve to collect parameters of the function. So each function may have parameters or may not. If it doesn't have parameters, we just leave the brackets empty like this. In our case, we want to calculate sum of two integers, so we need to pass those integers as parameters of the function. So here we have keyword function, function name, function parameters, and then comes the function body. Function body is we open with figure brackets, inside of which we write our instructions. In our case, we just need to perform a sum of these integers. It's the result of work of our function. So we return this value. And here it is. So you see, this is our functions, sum of two integers, its name of function, parameters of our function, and the return value. Everything is clear right now? I think, yeah. Fine. Fine. So it's the way we define a function. To call a function, we just type the name of a function, sum of two integers, open the round brackets, and type the integers we want to sum. It will be 1 and 2. So in the console, we should see 3. Of course, you don't see it because I did console log. So there is a result, but we don't see it. Yeah, here it is. 3 is a result of our function. I see a question. Give me a minute. Usually we name functions.
Sorry,
yeah.
Could you please read it out loud because it's not visible in the recording? Thanks. The question, I mean.
The question. I'm totally lost with this web version of Teams.
Well, I can read it for you. Is there a preferred way of when to name function with lower or capital letters? For example, sum of two integers and sum of two integers capitalized.
Yeah. Basically, usually we start naming our function with lowercase, but there are different conventions on how we name our function. For example, this variant is called camel case, when you start in like each word from the uppercase, O uppercase, T uppercase, and etc. We could name our function like this. So there are different ways of naming it, but in my experience, the camel case, starting with lowercase, is the most common one. Did I answer your question? Okay. No, exactly opposite. In most of the cases, you start with the lower case. Yes. Vilmantas, I'm glad I answered the question. We go on to the next way of defining a function. This way is called function expression. In this case, you start with creating a variable. It will be the same functions. We just will define it in different ways. So function expression, you start with create a new variable function as parameters. And run it. So here it is. The only difference is you don't create a function with a keyword function. You store the function in a variable, which in our case has the same name. And as in the previous case, you pass parameters and return some value. Is it clear? Guys, please show some reaction. Okay, fine. But there is a difference in the way function defined with function declaration and function defined with function expression behave. So there is a such term in JavaScript called hosting. Let me demonstrate you. So we have function sum of two integers defined with function expression way, and then we call we log the result of function here. So here is the result 6. First we define a function, then we call it. It works. But when we do the opposite, first run function, then define int, we'll get the reference error, which says cannot access sum of two integers before initialization. And it's always like this for function expressions. If we do the same for function declaration, it will work fine. Run, here's our result. And this is called hosting. It's like we will talk about it, I think, on the second lecture with more details. But for today, hosting is possibility of calling a function before declaring it. Is it clear? Fine. Fine, maybe some questions. Okay, no questions. We can continue. We will comment function declaration and stay with function expression. Function expression, here is the variable we store in function, and you see that here function itself doesn't have a name. So it's just keyword function, then the number of parameters, and then the body of the function. Yeah. If the function doesn't have a name, you call it anonymous function. It's really simple. It's really talking itself name. Anonymous function is a function without name. Function expressions might have name. For example, do sum, but in this case, we don't need it. For example, we might need it in case when we need to call the same function again in the body of a function. So if we need to do this, a function must have a name. And this example shows another term of JavaScript function world is recursion. Recursion is basically a function that calls itself. In a recursive function, you must have some condition to not to make this function run on and on endlessly, because if we create a function which return a function, then we will enter an endless cycle. I think you understand it. So not to do this, we should write some expression in the body of a function which prevents us from this endless cycle. Okay, we had function declaration, function expression, hosting, recursion. Here we go. We continue with the function expression, and really another way of defining a function. For now, let's say, because this is keyword, this is for topic in the thing. We have like some block of information in this part, and for now, let's say.
I think you'll have to repeat that because you cut off.
Do you hear me now?
You're a bit laggy, but I guess it's okay.
Okay, I'll repeat myself. Victoria, for now, let's assume that it's the only way of calling a function, like recursion function that calls itself, because keyword this and scope of a function and other stuff is content for the second lecture. And I don't want to overcomplicate things for now, because you just starting. Okay, thank you. We continue. Now I would like to introduce another way of defining a function.
Sorry, again, we can't see your screen, at least for me.
Oh. Yeah, technical issues again. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Fine. We go to another way of declaring a function. It's called arrow function. Really, it's just the extension of a function expression, but visually it looks a bit different because it was introduced after the function expression was created. It appeared with the ES6 standard. The way we define an arrow function is the same as function expression. So we start with creating a variable, then equal sign. In arrow functions, we don't use function keyword. After the equal sign, we just start in typing the parameters of the function like this. And then, why is it called arrow functions? We use this sign, arrow. And here is the important part. If we want just to return some expression, in our case is just sum of two integers, we can write something like that. So you see this syntax is a bit unusual, but for some purposes, it's much clearer and shorter. But if you need to perform some calculation before returning a value, after the arrow, you type the brackets, do some calculations here, return some value. So it's the arrow function in a nutshell. Is it clear? Do you have some questions? Is the default preferred? I would like to talk from my experience. So I'm JavaScript engineer. Most of the time I work with React framework, and really in most of the cases I use arrow functions, but it depends. There are some cases, for example, as I demonstrated example with hoisting, when to avoid some reference error or missing parameters error, you use, for example, function declaration. But most of the time we use arrow functions. There is a difference in function declaration and arrow functions, but I think we will talk about it in a second lecture. Arrow function doesn't have its own scope, so you can't use this keyword inside of arrow function, but you can in function created in function declaration way. Okay? Can I go further to the next part? Okay, fine. So we talked about ways of creating a function. Different people, in fact, use different words. Like you can use create function, declare function, define function, but basically it means the same. We created function with the help of in function declaration way, in function expression way, and we created arrow function, which is semantic extension of function expression. And we call them using the name of the function with brackets and parameters, or the variable and parameters it's stored in. Is it clear? Can I continue? Okay, fine. Now I would like to talk about in more details about parameters of the function, the values we use here. There are different I forgot one thing. So when we define a function, the thing is called parameters. But so it's like some values that function use called parameters. But when we call function itself, like when we're using its name and the actual real values, these values 4 and 5, which in fact might change. We might want to calculate sum of different integers. 4 and 5 are called arguments of a function. So the difference is we call them parameters when we define the function, when we don't know what exact values will they have, but we call them arguments when they have exact values. Is it clear? Yes, fine. We go further. I would like to talk about parameters in details. So parameters of the function are required. We use them in the body of a function to perform some calculations. We have here the simplest one, but what if one of the parameters is missing? For example, we just pass one parameter which stands for integer 1, but integer 2 is missing. In this case, parameters missing automatically have undefined value. So you've already heard about basic types in JavaScript, like null, undefined, string, number, object. Am I right? Yes, fine. So in this case, when we run this function, it won't work because the second parameter isn't defined. And so basically, to prevent unexpected things, for example, when you forgot to pass a parameter or etc., it's a good solution to have some default values for your parameters. To define default values for each parameter, you just do like this. Integer 1 is 1 by default, integer 2 is 3 by default. So if one of these parameters, any of these parameters, in fact, won't be passed, it will use these default values. Yeah. Okay, we continue talking about function parameters. Let's continue exploring this topic. I would like to tell you about the argument object. It's a keyword argument which we can use inside of our function to get the array of real arguments. So arguments are the real values which we pass to the function inside of the round brackets. And then here. So arguments. So, and here is the return object arguments. And this is the good example on the previous question, which way of creating a function should I use? If you, for some reason, if you need to use the arguments array in your function, you better choose function declaration, because function defined with arrow function doesn't have access to arguments object. From ES6, yes. So if you want to work with arguments, arguments object isn't the only way. Like it's was deprecated from ES6, but it still works, as you see. If you want to get arguments inside of arrow function, you can use, like, one of the solution is to use props, like it will be the single object containing your values, And when you, excuse me, if your arrow function has only one parameter, you can omit its values and use it like this. But in this way, you should have the one argument which are passed to a function. It's the default solution, not the best one. If you want to pass arguments to a function like this, in the previous way, you should destructure your function arguments. Are you familiar with ES6 destruction objects?
I don't think they are, no.
Oh, okay. We will omit this part. Like,
I think they know REST parameters though.
mm-hmm. I will show this example to finish it, so maybe it will help you to study this topic in the future. So if you want to access parameters from the arrow function, we will take another example, sum of many integers, which will perform some calculations. So if you want to like isolate one parameter and have the rest as an object, like the way arguments object works, you type here the parameter you want to get, and then you use this keyword, like 3 dots, which create an object of the all rest parameters. But yeah, I'm afraid you don't understand it. So where do we go next? Let's talk between each other. Do you have some questions? You can turn on your audio. We can talk, maybe solve some tasks in your life mode. What do you think? Because it seems like we covered the topic of today's lecture. So it was about defining functions, calling function, defining function in different way, function declaration, function expression, arrow functions, calling them. We talk about hosting, what else? Scope of the function. This is the topic for the next lecture. So for me, it's important to pass this knowledge for you and ensure you understand the things well. So on the next lecture, we can continue and discuss more complex stuff. So do you have some questions, guys? Yeah, of course. Okay, to try the functions, basically, here is my browser. You open the developer tools, like you don't even need to go to some website. You open the developer tools. Here is a console, which you can use to create functions, run them, and etc. But I prefer this site. It's called Jsfiddle. Where is it? Yeah, web view. Jsfiddle, I prefer it to try some stuff. It can run CSS, JavaScript, HTML, and here is the output. So for me, it's the simplest way if I want to try something. To read more about theory part, I can suggest you the MBN website, which is Mozilla, mozilla.org site. You can use this to read not about functions, but basically for, it's in Russian, sorry, guys. I suggest you to go to MDN Web Docs first if you want to read something, some documentation about JavaScript, and another helpful resource is W3 Schools. They have theoretical material, they have some free courses, so it's really a great resource. And you want to tell about hosting more. No problem, you're welcome. Do you understand the things I talked about hosting before? Like the example with function declaration and function expression? Yes. So for now, it's the only thing you need to know about this. If you can't call a function before it was defined, it doesn't mean this type of defining a function doesn't support hosting. So to do this, you use a function declaration. Okay. Any more questions, guys?
I think there's one more question about the REST parameters.
Yeah, because today's lecture is really short. Like we talked about everything, I think, for today. As I said, I'll be glad to answer your questions. So if you have some, you can ask me now or write me in text. I would really like to hear feedback because it's only two people speaking here. It's a little bit strange, you know. Okay. Thank you very much for joining us today. And have a nice evening, guys. If you have some questions, please don't hesitate to reach me. Okay?
Thank you, Nikita.
Thank you. Bye.